Okay. How do I set up my tables on my box planer, my site planer? And why am I making this video? Well, because some of you responded to a previous video that I uploaded. They had a question. Because they got problems with their box planer, their site planer, their Craftsman 12.5 inch. They say that when they pass their timber through, it don't end up true. So, I thought I'd show you how to set the tables up, or what you should look out for. You see on this planer here, and this happens to be a Multico planer, which has a 2-cutter block, as it has, yeah, there you go. So you've got 2, not 3. Now, your site planer will probably only have 2 cutters as well. And obviously the speed, the transport speed, you know, of your piece of wood going through is matched to your cutter block, usually. Now, the thing is, you see, if you don't get your tables set up correctly, you're going to get snipe, or you're going to end up with, well, unevenly planed pieces of wood. Now, especially on those box planers, because they don't have a table like this one, that's one piece and goes from one end to the other. On your box planer, you'll have folding tables, because you know, the idea is you can pick it up and chuck it in the back of your van, or the boot of your car, or whatever. Now, they have adjustment. Under each table, there is 2, adjustable screws, usually. They're like little stops that allow the table to sit on. They sit on these little stops. Now, if they're not set up correctly, you have a situation where that roller does not line up with that roller, well, then you're going to have a problem of snipe or uneven planing. Now, if I show you this with this straight edge, remember this is a one-piece table. My adjustment is actually on the rollers themselves, not on the tables. The thing about those box planes, they're really susceptible to the tables being all over the place. Now, you don't just sit the tables up on those screws on one side either. You've got to do both sides. So if you have straight edge like this one, you bring it over to one side of your rollers, set the 2 little stops, basically like little bolts with a nut on, and get your height correct on that one. Then move it to the other side of the table and do the same on that. Otherwise, you could potentially put a twist in your timber as it's running through your actual planer. Now, the other thing you've got to watch out for is that you have your infeed roller here and your outfeed roller there. And both rollers are driven, okay? Not psychologically driven, no. I mean, they go round, all right? And they pull your wood through, all right? So imagine this piece of wood here, okay? It's actually an aluminium straight edge. Being pulled through this planer, all right? And we've just been pulled by the first roller, which is a straight edge roller here. Then we end up underneath the second roller here, okay? And then we end up on the outfeed table roller. As we're going, as you see, it gets to a point where it will actually leave the first roller. And at that point, it can do that up against the cutter block, you see. Oh, so then you end up with snipe, so that's no problem. So what you've got to do is provide extra support, or make sure that you're actually holding that down as it leaves. But on those site planers, the tables aren't that rigid, are they? So you really need to provide some additional support, such as a roller stand or something like that. The other thing you've got to watch with those roller stands is that the ones with the one single roller on them, they tend to influence the direction of your, if you haven't lined it up properly, they'll end up bringing your piece of timber out sideways at an angle. So you've got to watch that as well. So you can't just leave it and let it do its thing. You've got to actually keep your eye on it and actually help it. So, but what you do is, you see, when you set those rollers up, you have a long straight edge on your table like so, and wherever that comes, holding it down, you know, if you had a nice long straight edge, that is where your roller's got to be. Just slightly under. Just tiny amount under, because what you don't want to be doing is butting the roller and knocking the stand over. I've been there, done that a million times, especially when you're dealing with things like a string on a staircase, for instance. It's so heavy and so long, you can just quickly knock it over. I tend not to use those kind of things for that reason. I tend to use a old machine stand, a bit like those things you get, well, I can't see one actually, if there's one over there actually. But you get the machines on, and I use those, and I basically clamp, having a clamp arrangement with a piece of wood on the top, because you're not going to knock it over. So, just all things you've got to bear in mind. So your rollers here must be set, or your tables must be set perfectly in line with each other. Otherwise, you're hiding to nothing. And don't forget, with those planers, they're not like this. They're not built like this. This thing's solid. It's all cast iron. Those tin type box planers, they flex and they move. So you've got to help them. You've got to give them extra support. I can pass a piece of wood through this flipping thing, and that end roller will hold it down to the table until it leaves. And I get very little snipe, which is where you take a scallop at the end of the piece of wood where it's left the first, the first drive roller. So you just got to bear this in mind. You just got to think it through, really. Now, the other thing about those box planes is because the cutter blocks are relatively small, they're quite a small diameter. And that allows the actual two rollers, and usually on them they're like a rubber roller, aren't they, on most of those box planers. They're closer together as well. That is not necessarily a bad thing. You can end up with less snipe because the rollers are closer together. So effectively there's less distance for the actual piece of timber running through to actually fall onto the actual cutter block of underneath. So you just got to make sure you provide support. Without that support, you're going to have problems. Now, if you're trying to use your thicknessor planer like this to true your timber, it is possible to do so, but you need to create a sledge arrangement. Now, if that was the gentleman's issue regarding his Craftsman 12.5 inch, what you want to do is create a new table, and you can actually, basically, you can temporarily fix a piece of wood underneath it and run it over the sledge. And then you turn your thicknessor planer into a surfacer, where you can true a piece of timber up. But you're not going to true a piece of timber up with a thicknessor. A thicknessor there is to work off one reference face. So you've got to have a true face, like me, to start with. Yeah. So basically, the ideal thing to do is, if you're doing a small piece of timber, is to use a jointer plane. If you've got an actual physical jointer, this is not a jointer, this is a surface, this is a combination machine. A jointer plane, as an electric jointer, has very long tables, and not normally such a wide cut. You'll end up with a big one, be an 8 inch, for instance, as a jointer. Or you could use a hand plane, such as a Stanley Bailey number 7 or 8, or something like that, a very long hand plane, which will true up your piece of timber. But you need obviously loads of skills to do that as well. Anyway, I hope that was of interest and of use to somebody. Just make sure your tables are lined up. And remember, it is a thicknesser, and you must have one reference face that is true. Or make yourself some kind of jig arrangement. Sort of, like a sledge kind. Yeah, that kind of thing anyway. Yeah, it was time for me to go. So I say toodaloo, But please boot the old like button, helps the channel, and maybe subscribe, and you'll get a warm fuzzy feeling in your pocket every time I upload another video. And we will be going live soon. And maybe at the time you're watching this video, we might already be going live. Come to that. Yeah. Who knows? Toodaloo! Yeah, and don't try and plane bits of aluminium, no. Don't do that. It's dangerous.